life is a story, a plot that thickens with each passing moment. Celebration, tragedy, hope, redemption. Wherever you are in your story, home is waiting.
Everybody, good morning. So good to see you this morning. Happy Mother's Day to all of you mamas out there. I am so excited to get to be here this morning with my husband, TD. It's so fun for us to be back in Rockford. We used to live here, right? Yes. And it felt like it feels like a long, long time ago. We were getting super nostalgic and feeling super grateful as we drove around yesterday. We left here with little tiny kids, 5 and 7-year-olds, and then now they're like 15 and 17. Like, how did that happen? I brought a picture to show that I kept them alive this long. My daughter would like to point out she's actually 5'10". She's in the sand sinking down. She's actually much taller than me, for sure. So she would be mad if I didn't point that out to you guys. This is my beautiful family. We're also a little crazy. So this is a picture of more of us being a little more real of really who we are. We are so grateful, happy that we had the time that we had here in Rockford. It meant so much to us to be here. I actually got to do the service for a girl that lived across the street from us. Maybe you know Daly Parks or the Parks family. I got to do their ceremony yesterday. She got married. She was 11 when we lived here. Now she's like a married woman, which is super exciting. So we just had like a full Rockford weekend. And it's been a beautiful picture for us to look and see all God has done. And be super grateful for where we are now. We're in Ventura, California, planted Mission Church out there. And we have had over 600 baptisms since we have been out there. So yeah, pretty cool, pretty awesome. A lot of people said like, oh, wow, really hard. You're called to the beach, okay? Called to California, okay? But God has done great things. So we feel like it wasn't just the beach that brought us there. So anyway, it's just been really fun to get to be here this weekend. And as you're walking in today, you know, I don't know where you're walking in. I don't know what your story is this morning. If you feel really far from God and you're kind of stepping into church for the first time in a long time, or maybe you came today as like a favor to your mom, okay? She's like, what I want is for you to come to church with me. So you're like, fine, I'll go to church, but that's it. That's all I'm doing, okay? That counts, okay? Good for you. I'm glad you're here. I don't know if you're walking in here and even Mother's Day is kind of hard, kind of like Tyler prayed. Just for some of us, it's a hope deferred. And we're waiting to be moms, and so this day can be a little bit difficult. For some of you, maybe you lost your mom or having a strange relationship with your mom, and so it makes Mother's Day a little bit harder. But wherever you're walking in this morning, I just want to say you're welcome here. And I hope that this morning, as you come in, that you don't leave the same, that you feel encouraged, that you feel a little more hopeful, that you see a little bit more of God paying attention to you, knowing your story, seeing your story. Because every single one of us has this unique and beautiful story. We have days that turn into weeks, that turn into months, that turn into years, that turn into the story of our life. And what I would hope that you get out of this morning is to know that when you walk out of this place, your story is a story of hope. That you feel God's hope, God's excitement for what he's called you to and what he has for you in your future. And I would hope that would be what you gain from this morning. That we believe around here that there actually is hope for everyone, for every single one of us. No matter how far you've run, no matter where you're at, no matter what your story brings you today, there is hope for you. And that's what I want to talk about today. And I love that it's Mother's Day because as we talk about our stories and we talk about our lives, who we are today has a lot to do with our mamas, right? With our families of origin. And what I've learned about families, and maybe you know this, every family's got a little bit awkward in their family, okay? You know, and maybe yours is the exception. I doubt it, okay? But, my family has a little bit of awkward in it. My parents have been married for 50 years this year, which is pretty amazing. Super proud of them. I have an amazing relationship with them. I love them. But we got our fair share of awkward, okay? And I didn't really realize this. Like most people, you don't realize this until you like bring somebody home to meet your family. Like you start dating somebody or your roommate or you get married and like you bring them home and then the other person lets you know how awkward your family is, you know? They're like, that is super weird that your family does that. And you're like, really? I thought every family did that, right? Well, I had one of these moments. When I was growing up, my mom she was a class classic mom, and like a lot of us moms today, she videoed every single thing that we did. Now, the difference between us moms today that, have our phones that have cameras on them and we shoot a video of our kid and upload it on Instagram, look what they ate for breakfast. Woo, we're all excited. My mom had a camera that was like the size of a refrigerator with like a VCR video tape in it, okay? A lot of you don't know what that is. That's fine. You don't need to know what that is, okay? It's not like vinyl records. They're not coming back and being cool, okay? But there used to be these things that were like videotapes, and you had to like put them in your VCR, watch them later. Well, my mom had this and a giant video camera. I didn't even know what her face looked like until I was older because it was always half covered with this camera, okay? And I kid you not, the woman videoed everything, okay? So if you ever are interested in anything I did growing up, I have proof of it, including the time that I brought TD home for the first time to meet my family. Yeah, right, okay. Didn't feel like that in a moment. My mom literally, we show up, she opens the door, camera on her shoulder, okay? Who's this boy, Jenny? Tell us all about him. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. TD was like, this is super awkward. She made him sit down with his guitar and play a song for the video camera, okay? Listen, if you don't believe in miracles, you should at this moment that this man stayed with me and still wanted to date and marry me eventually, right? Okay? Big deal, right? But there's a little bit of awkward in every family. All of us have it. You're probably thinking of the person that's awkward in your family right now. You can get a picture of them. If you can't think of anyone, it's probably you, okay? I'm just saying you might want to consider that, okay? But I don't know what kind of family you had. I don't know if they were awesome and you had aunts and grandmas and moms and dads that loved you well and poured their amazing life into your life to make you who you are today. Or if when we talk about family, there's a lot of baggage there, maybe a little hurt there, or addiction there, or abuse, or pain. But no matter where we are with our families, all of us have families that were imperfect. So no matter how great they were or how bad they were, they have formed a little bit about who we are, both the good and the bad. So today as we jump in and see what God has to say about what it looks like to live a life of hope, that if there really is hope for everyone, what we're going to do is take a look at the family tree of Jesus and learn together more about who he is by looking at where he came from. So one of the coolest things that I love about Jesus is he actually had an awkward family too. Not so much God the Father, okay? He kind of has it put together. But his earthly family, the people that God chose to raise Jesus, they were a little crazy. I mean, we see a list of his family tree at the beginning of his story because it's common for the Bible to do that. Maybe you've read some of those Old Testament passages, and it's like so-and-so begat so-and-so begat so-and-so, and then there's like a list of super weird names, and you're kind of like, you lost me at begat, okay? Like, I don't really know what that means. But it's cool to start reading your Bible and to actually learn some of these stories and then, see them in these genealogies and see how it all plays out and plays together. And so what's amazing about looking and knowing these stories is when we learn that we are just like these people. Just like these people in this story is that they are imperfect, broken, awkward people who all have one thing in common. God was in pursuit of them in spite of their lack of faithfulness to him. Enter Jesus. He sends the Messiah, which is just another word for Savior, his son, to make a way for us to have God and us be in relationship with each other again. So when we look at all the people who are tucked in Jesus' past, it's so cool because if you were making this up, like if this wasn't true and you were just trying to make a great story, you would never put these people in his story, in his genealogy. Because the family that God chose to raise his son was scandalous. I mean, we look at all these people. It's got some crazy names in it. First of all, things like Amimadad, Zerubbabel, Jehoshaphat, Zadok, Nagai, okay? So maybe if you're expanding your family, some of those would be something you would want to consider for your child. They're found in Matthew 1 and Luke 3 if you need to get the spelling, okay? But there was also this guy named Jacob whose name meant deceiver because he lied a lot, okay? In fact, one of the most famous stories about him is when he deceived his own father to steal his brother's blessing. And apparently his brother was super hairy, so he basically put on an ape costume and went in and was like, give me my brother's blessing. And dad didn't know, and that seriously happened, okay? There was a guy named Jacob. Oh, I already said it. Okay. Jacob's son, Judah, he slept with his daughter-in-law. But if it makes you feel better, don't worry. He didn't know it was her because she was dressed up as a prostitute, okay? She gets pregnant after that, and then he wants to have her killed because she's pregnant. And then she's like, hey, guess what? It's actually your baby. And he's like, what? And it's like this big Jerry Springer episode. Like, is he really the father? Truly, this is like somebody that is like this kid is in Jesus' genealogy, okay? There's a peeping Tom named David who was creeping on a married woman while she was taking a shower, had an affair with her, got her pregnant, killed her husband to try to get out of it. And then one of his sons, Solomon, is in the genealogy of Jesus, and he had 700 wives and 300 concubines or mistresses, okay? And you know what? I'm not even going to touch that. I don't even know what to do with that. I don't even know. There was one guy named Manasseh, okay, which is also another great baby name if you're looking for one. He was a wizard, and I don't mean like the cute kind, like Harry Potter, okay? Like he was like Game of Thrones kind of wizard, like sacrificing the son, like bad dude, okay? All of these people were in the genealogy of Jesus. All throughout this family tree was incest, adultery, prostitution, murderers, deceivers, idol worshipers, sex addicts, and just a bunch of people who were messed up. I mean, Jesus had a pretty shady family tree. Get it? Shady tree. Get it? Okay. You'll get it later when you're on your way home. But the good news about this family tree is that the Messiah came from a mess. A mess. Which means if you ever thought you were too far gone for God, you're not. If you ever thought your imperfect life disqualifies you from his purposes, it doesn't. If you ever thought that your messed up family has made you too messed up, it hasn't. If you ever thought you were beyond the reach of a loving God, you aren't. If you ever thought that it would be crazy for you to show up in a church, you are in good company. If you ever thought you were too broken, too wounded, too abused, too foolish, that you ran too far or have fallen too much, your story is not over. If you ever thought that if you accepted God's grace, you'd just end up disappointing him too, you won't. If you ever thought you ate too much, drank too much, doubted too much, are too much to handle, too much to love, are not worth anything, you haven't, you're not, and you are worth the life of God's one and only Son. Amen. Whatever you've been through, whatever you've overcome, whatever baggage you carry that has been handed to you by broken people, it does not disqualify you from God's grace. Not his love, not his plan for your life. Actually, it's all of those things that qualify you for it. See, the good news of Jesus' family tree is that the people that Jesus came from are actually the ones that he came for. People just like you and people just like me, broken and selfish and foolish and lost. And for whatever reason, this is who God chooses. This is his idea to use them, to use their lives, to make a way back for them. This is the good news of the Son coming through this family tree. And so today I want to zoom in on one of my most favorite characters in this whole genealogy, and her name is Rahab. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with her story. Maybe you're like a friend of mine who was brand new to all of this, and we were sitting down to study the Bible together, and by the time we got to Rahab, she just looked at me and she said, listen, I don't know nothing about Rahab, but I know all about rehab, okay? So I don't know if that's where you're walking in today, like if you know a lot about Rahab or a lot about rehab. Either way, I really think this story has a lot that we can pull out from it today. See, Rahab was a prostitute, and she's often referred to in the Bible as Rahab the prostitute. Ever been there? You know, where you're labeled by the one thing in your life you wish that everybody would just kind of forget about. So she's labeled as this. And she's listed in Jesus' family tree pretty early on. So her story is found pretty early on in your Bible, just about 6 books from the front in Joshua 2. Now, the context of this story is that the Israelite people, which were God's chosen people, and the reason they were God's chosen people is that's who he was using to be the part of Jesus' lineage. The family tree was going to come from these people. These people had been enslaved by Egypt for a really long time. They had left slavery out of Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea, got parted the Red Sea. They walked across. So this is post-Red Sea parting. And what happened is they ended up having to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, waiting for this promised land that God was going to give them, waiting for it to come true finally. So they're finally in this moment. Was about to happen. And so they sent a couple spies in to look at the land. The problem was when they sent the spies in, they found that people were already living there. So they actually had to come and take it over. So in Joshua 2, it says that Joshua, the son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Now, I got to be careful when I say that place that they're from, okay? Like, I just got to be careful because I don't want to be, like, swearing in church or anything. But that's really in the Bible. So that's what it says. But I have to be careful or else Greg won't ask me to come back. Okay, anyway, so they're from this one place, okay? And he says, go look over the land. He said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab, and they stayed there. And so the king of Jericho had heard that maybe there were some spies in the land. He actually went to Rahab and he was like, hey, have you heard anything? And she ended up lying to the king, and hid the spies a little bit longer. And then it says, in the next passage, it says that she went up to the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard of how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea, and when we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. See, she had heard about God. She had heard about what he had done for his people, and she was smart. And she was like, you know what, if you guys are coming in, if you're looking at this place to take over, I'm pretty sure you're the winning team. And so she boldly asked, can I switch teams? Can I join your team? And can you spare my family? And so they say to her, our lives for your lives, the men assured her. If you don't tell what we're doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land. And so she lets them down by a rope from her window. They go down, and they tell her that she just needs to tie a scarlet cord around the rope of the window of her home and bring anybody who belongs to her, anybody that she wants to save, needs to bring her into her home, and that they will keep her safe and not harm her family. And so it says in 2:21 that she tied the scarlet cord in the window, and then she waited and waited. It's like 4 chapters later, she is still waiting. Because see, what happens is the spies have to go back. They had to hide for a while. And then they had to go back to the people. And then they had to wait to hear from God what his plan was for taking over this city. And so the plan was we're going to march around it 6 times. Or we're going to march around it 1 time for 6 days. And on the 7th day, we're going to march around it 7 times. And then the walls are going to fall. So it's pretty exciting. So once they get that plan from God, they're like, okay, we're going to do it. And then they had to get all the people together and get them all organized. And I don't know about you. I have 2 kids, and it takes us forever to leave the house, okay? So I'm pretty sure it took a while for them to get out and get going. And as you can imagine, Rahab is just waiting. She knows that the imminent doom is coming for her city, and she's hoping, keeping her fingers crossed, that she made the right switch. And she's standing outside her window. That scarlet cord is hanging out there, and she's waiting. And as you can imagine, as she sees this army coming over the hill, she probably got so excited. Like, yes, here they come. It's finally happening. I'm on the right team. I can feel it in my bones. I feel it. It's going to be awesome. And then they come up, and then they walk around the wall. And she's like, it's cool, it's cool. They probably just think, check it out tomorrow. Tomorrow they're going to come back, and then everything's going to be great. And then they come back tomorrow, it's the same thing. And the next day, the same thing. Can you imagine the trust that she would have had to keep that scarlet cord hanging outside the window and not give up? Listen, how many times for us does that happen where we think we hear something from God, and then it's like, hurry up and wait. Like, here are these promises that are going to come true, and I think that I'm making the right decision. I think I'm joining the right team here, and then it just feels like it's taking forever. Taking forever for his promises to come true. Taking forever for this thing that I really desire to happen. It's taking so long. Like, what is the problem? God, listen, I want to tell you today, be encouraged. God's not done yet. His timing is just different than ours. But he comes in, and he will be faithful. And he will rescue, and you have picked the right team. Just hang on a little bit longer. And that's exactly what happens in this story. The 7th time around, when the priest shouted and the trumpets blast, Joshua commands the army, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. And the city that all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. And then he says, only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies that we sent. And I love this, that he's having this Braveheart battle cry moment. He's like, yeah, let's take the city. And he's like, oh, by the way, don't forget that we have the one girl. We said we would save her family. So like everybody good? Okay, we're good on that? Okay, now let's take the city, So when the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and the sound of the trumpet, the men gave a loud shout. The walls collapsed, so everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. And in the middle of this chaos, it says, Joshua said, go into the prostitute's house and bring her out and all who belong to her. So they went in and brought out Rahab, her father and mother, her brothers and sisters, and all who belonged to her, and they put them in a place outside the camp of Israel. And then they burned the city and everything in it. Now, there's so many things I love about this story. I love this connection with Jesus' family tree. I love that Rahab was the wrong everything. There was nothing stereotypical about her. She wasn't part of these people. She wasn't part of their faith. She wasn't part of their promise. She was the classic wrong person, wrong place, wrong time. And God looked at her and he said, perfect, perfect. You're just who I need. You're a woman, you're a prostitute, you don't even believe in me, you're living in the enemy camp. Yep, I choose you. Every single thing that our world would say disqualified her actually qualified her with God. God said, come be a hero. And she said yes to the rescue. She said yes, she reached up her hand and she said, I want to be a part of this bigger story. And it's so cool that she's a part of this family tree because she's mentioned in this lineage. One of the cool things about this is that most lineages didn't even include women in them, but in Jesus' lineage, there's 5 women mentioned because that's how much Jesus loves women. And she's also in Hebrews 11 in the Hall of Faith where this particular incident is listed as one of the most faithful things that a person can do, that we look to her life and what she did as an example of this faith. This huge story that was being written from her life. And I love that her choice of obedience doesn't just save her, but it saves all who belong to her. How cool is that picture for us that her yes to God's rescue, her faith, her trust didn't just save her life, but she got to bring everybody that mattered to her into that room, and they were all rescued. Listen, some of you are walking in here with pain and brokenness and a mess of a life and a mess of a past that has been handed to you. You have permission to say, it stops with me, and I will bring the people who belong to me into my home, into my life, into the hope that God has given me. And God's not just going to rescue me. He's going to change the generations coming up behind me. He's going to give them a new story because I choose to be faithful to him. That's our option. That's what we see with this story. This story, this girl, she is an amazing picture for us that no matter what our story is, God's grace is available to us. That's actually why Jesus came. That we have hope and we have a new story. And it's not because we are good, but it's because God is. And it's not because we love him, but it's because he first loves us. When we let him be the new director of our life, it changes the trajectory of our life. And it doesn't just rescue us. It saves the people coming up behind us. He doesn't just forgive us. He gives us a new life on mission for him, and that is actually where new hope comes from. So, what does hope for everyone look like practically in our lives? I think there's this phrase that's helped me, and I'm going to kind of break it down for us today, but it basically just says this. It means that you, even me, are invited in daily to the process of God's bigger story. So what I want to do is just break that down for us piece by piece. First of all, like I've been saying all morning, and like I hope you hear, you are invited in. No matter what your story is, no matter how far you've run, no matter how far you think you've got from the reach of a loving God, your story is not over, and your mess can become his message. And that is the whole point of all of this. Every single one of us are invited in. And listen to me, we as Christians are often known more for who we leave out than who we let in. That is not the heart of God. The heart of God is that we would be a people who recognize our rescue and we say, yes, my life was a mess, Yours is too. Let's do this together. Let's get redeemed together. Let's get rescued together. The church should be the easiest place for the most lost people to come and find hope, because that is what happened for each of us. We should be known by what Jesus' heart was, which is everybody's welcome here. Everybody's in here. So don't think he won't use your life, your mess, to become his message to the world that hope is real. That your life will be something people look at and like, well, if he could rescue you, he could probably rescue anybody, okay? Don't be afraid of that. He showed up in the middle of a brothel and used a prostitute to rescue a nation. Don't think he's not going to show up in the middle of your cubicle, in the middle of that nursery, in the middle of your gym, in the middle of a boardroom, in the middle of that broken marriage, in the middle of that rundown house, in the middle of that friendship, in the middle of that wayward kid. Don't think he's not going to show up there and use your life for his glory. If you will recognize that you are invited in, it will change your life. You are invited in. But here's what I don't want us to miss. This very radical, amazing story of Rahab, this woman who was rescued by grace to become the rescuer of God's loved people. The reason that she got to be a part of this is because she showed up every day. You are invited in daily. This isn't every day. This isn't a Sunday morning sort of thing. This is like all day long, every day. His mercies are new every morning. His hope renews every morning. His leaning in to him leads us every single morning. See, as Rahab watched those guys walk around the city day after day after day, she kept that scarlet ribbon hanging out her window with hope that God was going to show up, with hope that the rescue was coming, even though she couldn't quite see it. It takes showing up every day and trusting that God cares more about who you are than where you go and what you do, and what he is doing is developing you right where you are every single day. It's daily. And I love that as it is daily, we recognize that it's not a quick thing, that it's actually a process. You see, he invites you in daily to the process, to his process. Now, we don't like things that take a process in our world. We're just not used to them, right? I mean, everything we have is instant, Instagram, okay? Like, it's just there, right, all of a sudden. And I even like the analogy of this idea of Instagram, because so much of what we do with our lives is, we take the quick picture of what's going on, and then crop out that, and put a filter on that, and now everybody knows my life is perfect, and it's so great, right? This is what we do with our lives. We're not used to things taking time and needing developed. But back in the ancient days when I was younger, there was this thing called film. Anybody heard of film? No? Okay. Let me explain it to you young people. This is what it is. It's like a camera that actually had nothing to do with a phone. You couldn't call anyone on this thing. You had to bring it separately. There were no traveling phones back in the olden days. And so this camera that you had, you actually had to go to the store and buy this stuff called film. And then you would put the film inside the camera, and then you would twist it around, make sure you loaded it right, okay? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Twist it around, make sure you load it right. Then you would go on your vacation, and then you would take pictures of all of these fun little moments, and you had no idea what they were going to look like. You didn't know if they were in the frame. You didn't know anything, okay? It was really exciting. And then you would come back from your vacation, and then you would have to go back to the same place you bought the film and give it back to them. And then they would send it off, and sometime within the next month, they would take their time and they would take it in to the dark room, and then they would put it in all these chemicals and process it and then hang it up to dry. And then you would get your pictures back, and it was like this glorious day when your pictures were finally done, and then you get them and realize that, your finger was covering the lens for all the pictures of your vacation. Like, this was the world we used to live in, okay? My point is, there was a big process involved in development. And we don't like the process involved in development, right? We like to just skip it over, post, and make it pretty. God's process is development. And sometimes it happens in the dark room. But he knows what he's doing. Let him take you there. Even those places that don't make sense and you can't quite see in front of you, you don't know exactly what he's doing, it's part of his process. And he cares about your development. And he will take you to the next place that you're supposed to go. And he'll actually use your life to be a part of his bigger story. So you are invited in daily to the process of his bigger story. That's one of the things that gives me the most hope about following Jesus. Because honestly, as I get older, my kids get older, and I'm looking at them, I'm like, how on earth is this happening? Life is going by so fast. My life feels really short, and sometimes that can be really daunting for me. But when I recognize that I actually am part of something so much bigger than me when I surrender my life to Christ, it's such a small picture of my little tiny life and how big his world is, and I actually get to be a part of it. It's kind of like this rope. You know, this idea of God's big story. It goes on and on and on. It's going to be here long after I'm gone, long after my kids are gone. It's going to keep going. And he has this long perspective, right? And we go back, and it goes back so far. You know, Rahab's like way back here, way back here. Her story. But look at us. We're still talking about it 2,000 years later. Why? Because this is the great, big, huge story of God. And this is my little tiny life. And it's small and on its own, frankly, quite insignificant. But when I get to be a part of God's big perspective, when I get to be part of this bigger story, it gives me such hope. Because then I get to know whatever I'm faced with, whatever I'm dealing with, whatever I'm going through, that he not only sits with me here in it, and he loves me here in it, and I get to know him here in it, but I actually get to be part of something really huge. And that is exciting. And that gives my life purpose. It gives my life meaning. It gives my family meaning. When we can actually be a part of something God is doing that is so much bigger than we are, that's really exciting, and that is where hope comes from. You know, hope is more than just superstitious, breath blowing out candles on lofty wishes. It can be defined by pipe dreams, grand aspirations, or put in a box of our limited inclinations. It is more. It is alive. It is real. It is here. Hope is a promise of what we yearn for but cannot see. The crack at the end of a tunnel of misery, the disaster response that wades through the debris when the floor becomes familiar to our knees. We have this hope set for our hearts in eternity. Hope that has no end. Hope in panic and pain and counting days clean. Hope in confusion, temptation, and crippling disease. Hope in waiting and wondering and stepping into unknown. Hope that whatever this life holds, he is still on the throne. He is hope. He is more. He is alive, and he's real. But listen, if we want to be a part of this, if we want to have lives that are like Rahab's, that actually matter for something really significant, that tell the story that no matter what your mess is, it could become a message, then we actually have to do one more thing. And we actually have to participate with his rescue. We actually have to tie that scarlet cord on the window and say, yeah, I actually do want out of this. And I don't know where you're at this morning or if you've ever actually said that to him, but I want to invite you to do that today. If you haven't already said, you know what, I'm tired of being the director of my life, will you please lead me? That's all you have to do to say yes to his rescue. I heard a story one time of this guy in Norway who fell into a porta potty, okay? Bear with me, okay? So that's really gross. And so the story is that his friend dropped his cell phone into the porta potty. The funny part about the story is he was a scuba diver, okay? So I just picture him going like, don't worry, I've got it. I'm a diver, And then he jumps in the porta potty after the phone and gets stuck in there, okay? So the rescue teams have to come and get him out. I doubt this phone even survived, okay? So moral of the story is, if you drop your phone into a porta potty, leave it there, okay? There is no phone worth jumping in a porta potty for, okay? I promise you, okay? But let me tell you, there ain't no phone I would ever get in a porta potty for. But if for some crazy reason, one of my kids was down there, if one of my kids fell down into that porta potty, you could not keep me out. See, here's the thing. That's exactly what God did when he looked down on this earth, this mess, this gross world. He looked down at it and he said, I got to get down there because my kid is down there. And I got to rescue them. And it is worth it to me. It is worth it to me to leave the throne of heaven and go down for my kid who needs my help and to rescue them. And so I want you to hear that today. See, God has been willing to come. He came through the lives of all of these people, and he did it on purpose so that we could see he loves to come through the mess. So whatever your mess is today, man, he wants to rescue you up out of it. So we're going to just take a few minutes this morning, and TD's going to come back and sing. And as we sing this song, it gives you an opportunity to kind of respond to that, to say to God, yeah, I actually do want to say yes to your rescue. And maybe it's the first time, or maybe it's just the first time today. Maybe yesterday was the last time, because it's a daily thing. But to give you an opportunity just to reflect on, man, this is so good that he was willing to come rescue me. And no matter what my story is, that I really do have hope, because there really is hope for everyone. Let's pray together. God, I am so grateful that that's true. When I think about the people that I've sat across the table from and heard their stories of loss and of grief and of pain and mistakes, God, and I have said those words, there's hope for everyone. And I have looked up at you and said, that better be true. And then I see over and over and over again how it is, and how you come through, and how you still work miracles, and how you still part seas and break down walls, and that you actually come down into the mess of our lives and work miracles in us. And then we get to be the kind of people who go out and live it. And Lord, that is our heart today, that we would understand that better, and that we'd be able to understand more how you want to do that in our own individual lives. That we would say yes to the rescue, yes to a life that lives daily and intentionally on purpose in the process of your bigger story. Thank you for that option. We love you. In Jesus' name.